Go for it, John.
Hello and welcome to our webcast, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about wrangling internal vulnerabilities in Active Directory domain reconnaissance. And as you can see on this slide, we have what I think is Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Yeah, it's not Wild Bill Hickok, because Wild Bill Hickok would be the one that would be associated with Deadwood, who was there about a week before he got shot.
Yes.
But if you go to the next slide, we're going to go ahead and do your slides. I'd like to invite you all to Wild West Hackin' Fest. So we have this really fantastic lineup of speakers. It is ridiculous how good the speakers are. I came up with a list of everybody that we wanted at this conference. Everybody that we wanted, and we got absolutely everyone except Johnny Long. He's on our website. He was planning on coming, has some things coming up, so he's not going to be here. So if you guys could do us all a favor, guilt Johnny Long into coming to Wild West Hacking Fest for me. That would be fantastic. But I'm going to hand it over to Kent and Jordan. They're going to go ahead and drive this webcast on these two topics, which are very important. We see lots of people that do these two things incorrectly. So, gentlemen, oh my God, did you take that upstairs in our office?
Yeah,
Yes.
Headquarters.
Safe house.
Security
Come
safe
work at
house.
Black Hills Information Security, and you too could be an extra in the Ring sequel. All right.
And there's some Twitter handles, everybody.
Yes, spelled correctly. All right, let's get on
All right.
this. So what we're going to talk about today is really what it looks like to have an internal pen test in the sense of doing reconnaissance in an Active Directory domain. So our drop zone is a domain workstation providing ourselves with a Kali Linux. So we're calling it reconnaissance from domain workstation or transient privileged internal Kali Linux workstation.
Similar to the way customers drop us on their network. Sometimes we get domain workstation, sometimes we get non-domain workstation, sometimes we get Kali, sometimes we get Debian.
And this is a picture of Custer, right?
Yes.
He's another person who got killed in the Midwest.
Well,
Actually in Montana, but close enough you can drive there from.
you know, we're really going for the Wild West theme there.
Is it literally going to be everyone that died violent, horrible deaths? That would be
Violently.
the country from here on out. Is that the theme of this webcast? Okay. Go ahead.
So in this case, we basically have a lab environment in our office, and Kent tries to maintain, like every sysadmin does, updates, patching, vulnerabilities, things of that nature, and then he drops in a pen tester and says, go, tell me
Yeah.
what's in there.
And it usually gets owned pretty quickly, needless to say. So the arsenal that we're going to use, we've got a lot of different tools here. Being a sysadmin, I need to try to make sure that these things can't run, right?
You can't see it. We're trying to make gun.
Gun noises. Oh, God, okay. Pew, pew, pew. Okay.
Very accurate.
Yes, time frame accurate. Pew, pew. Lasers. Okay, so we have different tools, and sysadmin, you know, one of your goals should really be to try to prevent some of these tools from being run, and therefore not being able to allow the systems to be compromised using these tools. Obviously, in the Windows domain environment that we had, we set it up much like someone would that has not had a pen test yet. The first pen test is always going to be a riddled report, very, very long with lots of suggestions and recommendations, and that's kind of where we start at. Most of these tools are going to run just fine in the environment that we built. So,
And this environment is really, really close to what we see in most of our pen tests, and that's, you know, the important thing is actually having a lab where you can try these things out before you actually run them on a customer network, but it's actually pretty close. A lot of things we're going to talk about here are very representative. There's always that one person on the webcast who's like, well, in my network, we don't use Active Directory. It's like, well, did you read the title? But no, this is very representative to see. So go ahead.
so the first tool we started off with, which I think I'll let Jordan talk about.
Sure. Responder, InBay. In this case, we were using Responder. It was an early win we didn't expect. So we had a system that dropped off our network and had a domain trust issue. So what do? We log on to that system with our DA account and unintentionally captured our own hash, cracked it, and got DA.
So it wasn't
Seriously that
intentional.
fast.
You caught your own hash. You were sniffing your own hash, and you
Unintentionally DA
Unintentionally.
rejoining a system on a network that had dropped
Holy
off.
So here's the point here is that what we did is we had a workstation that had fallen off the network, off the domain, and we needed to rejoin it. Now, we had started Responder prior to that because that's one of the first steps we're going to take on an engagement like this. So Responder is already set up and running. We're not really thinking about it. It's just the first step you take. Meanwhile, me as sysadmin working in the background need to rejoin a laptop to the domain and unintentionally whoops, I put out my IT admin creds, and there it goes, responder picks it up, and it's now in our list of hashes.
Now, and I think we should set up a little bit of background on link local multicast network request. For those of you that don't know, the way that Microsoft set up name translation, like whenever you're using DNS, think of it as a phone book. Like if you're looking up, you know, where you can buy pizza or good barbecue or any of those places, you find the name of the place and then you get the phone number. And DNS does that. It does that resolution to convert a name like yahoo.com into an actual number, which is like 69.67.something.something. And it does that resolution. Well, Microsoft came up with the idea. They said, what if DNS doesn't exist? So what happens is Windows computer systems, if they can't find a system or resolve that system, they'll literally broadcast to every system on the network, hey, where is this computer? And then some system that'll have that cached answer will respond back. However, running tools like Invade and Responder, you can respond back with bad responses, and then they will try to authenticate to you. And if you look down at the NTLM v2 SSP hash, you can see the 1122334455667788. That is actually the challenge that it sends to the client. The client then rolls their hash in with that challenge. And of course, because you can see the challenge and the response, you can capture both of them. So this isn't like a vulnerability. This is a feature, everybody.
However, as a result,
It is. You just shut it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on.
Hey, John, good to have you.
And we lost John. That's okay. We're going to keep on moving forward. So what we did here is, like I said, one of the first things we're going to do in the engagement, and we're going to take it a step further, because if you get a hash like this that you suspect might be a domain admin, the first thing you're going to want to do is, of course, crack it. So we're going to move right on into cracking hashes with this hash that we got from Responder. The command for Hashcat is there. It's M5600. Now, the password we used, we threw into crackstation.txt file so we could crack it, and you know, really easy to do, and we pulled our password right back out of it. And if you want to know what that password is, it's actually on the screen right now. It's summer 2016. Now, it's not a very good password for domain admin, but
Whatever.
you know,
Great.
whatever.
It has numbers.
It does have numbers. It's got
And a capital,
letters. It's
yeah.
got small letters. I mean, how can you go wrong? Here's the thing: is that using crackstation.txt, even with some masks on it, excuse me, we're able to crack a significant number of passwords. It's really incredible to me when I see Hashcat run on some of the stuff that we have, how many passwords we get that are actually in a dictionary. There's nothing we need to do to try to brute force or anything like that. It's just in a dictionary, so it's incredible.
Seeing our new cracker load this file into memory is amazing, and getting through 1 billion, 2
There's
billion
a blog
almost.
post on that.
There is, in fact, a blog post on that. Another note on that. Did you guys hear like Bo's most recent pen test that he was working on? He cracked
Yes.
97% of all of their passwords. So
That's incredible.
It is terrifying, really.
2017.
yeah, and summer 2017 was 70% of that.
Or the seasonal year password disorder problem.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. Like people they have like user awareness training on how to do good password, and they're like, here's a password that would be a good password, and everyone like writes it down, and that's now their password.
Excellent password 2017.
So welcome back, John.
Yeah, sorry, I said that for a second.
So you go, and happy to have you.
Fires.
So now that we've got a domain admin credential, we're going to go the next step further, and we want to get all of the credentials. So we're going to log into the DC domain controller, dump the sys and sam and ntds.dit files. So we grab those. Here's the key thing: is we didn't want to actually log in like remote desktop to a domain controller to do that. It wouldn't be really great practice to have that set up that way. So we tried something else. Using psexec to remotely run commands on the domain controller, created the volume shadow copy, excuse me, and got those files out. And we needed a quick way to exfiltrate these. And we were kind of thinking in the background, well, what's an easy way we could get this onto our workstation that we have on the domain? So since this was on the domain controller, we just put them in sysvol. And then immediately those files were available to all of the domain workstations, including our own. So we're able to quickly throw those files into sysvol, pull them off on the workstation that we had, and then immediately delete them back off using these remote commands. Once you've got the system, SAM, and the NTDS DIP file, you use a couple tools that we list here to pull out all of the user credentials from the Active Directory database that you exfiltrated. So going to the next slide, we put that back into Hashcat, this time using format M1000, which is the NTLM. And we kind of cheated here. Obviously, we used a cheater dictionary with a mask on it. You'll see why in the candidates number 1 on the screenshot there. You'll see our password is WinLab Bang 2017 Bang, and then a 5-digit number. 5-digit number being our employee IDs for the particular user in the lab. So we just cheated by making a cheater dictionary, which was the WinLab prefix there, followed by the digits. Ran that across the hash file that we got back, and of course resolved 225 out of 232. So we really did cheat this pretty good, but it's just proof of concept that the passwords that you can get just very easily using Hashcats, and if they're in dictionaries, they're going to be cracked. And the other point here is that with DA creds, we now have 97% of the passwords in the Active Directory environment. So where do you go from here? And clearly the point here is in the first 10 minutes, we've now got DA creds. So DA isn't everything, clearly. Going on? So Jordan, I'll kind of let you talk about password spraying. There's a few accounts there that we did get 225, obviously, but there's a few that we didn't get, and I'll let you talk about that.
So yeah, now we take our second approach to DA. We quickly stole a domain admin account and got through all that, and we added some of those commands in there for cracking hashes, combining Active Directory databases into usable and crackable hashes. So for sysadmins, going back to that slide, it's do this against your own network. Figure out how to alert or how to determine someone has stolen, cracked. You can do this stuff on yourself.
And a lot of this stuff too is also in the MITRE framework, the attack framework. We talked about it a couple of times in our last few webcasts. The MITRE framework, if you go, they have an attack techniques matrix. Go check that out. And a lot of these things that we're discussing are things that bad guys use all the time. And these tools cost what? Like free, right? So people should be running these before anyone ever gets, like, to pen test or an attacker ever gets on the network.
Yeah, if you're a domain admin, you're certainly capable of going and pull those systemscan and NTDS files and going run CrackStation across your creds on the domain and see what happens. I mean, you might run into some HR issues, but it's a good point that you know how many of the passwords in your environment are immediately compromised just by having them in a dictionary file.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we're password spraying. This is, again, our second attempt at getting to DA on this network. Basically, a password spraying, we gather credentials, or I apologize, we gather users on the domain, we gather the hosts on the domain, we figure out who's in DA, and then we run our domain policy to try to figure out how long passwords might be. So we just gather a few commands here, output those to files, and then we move on to password spraying. So we include some commands here for for loop with Windows Command Prompt. There's more tools in the webcast. You can use Mail Sniper for PowerShell against an Exchange interface, or OWA, EWS. But here we just use a pretty standard command prompt for loop to go and check a password we set with a variable against a list of users we gathered. So in this case, we captured another account.
Absolutely. This time, spring 2017. So you see a pattern there. So definitely password spraying can pick up some of those passwords that might not be in a dictionary, but you might want to try across the entire domain.
And we will, yeah, as Sierra just mentioned in the comments there, we will get these slides out so the commands are available to everybody. Go try this stuff on yourselves.
So really interesting component is Bloodhound, and this is something that Jordan showed me, and it's very interesting. Really gives you a matrix or hygiene of what your domain looks like for Active Directory.
In there.
There should be an eye in there. We did say these slides were not tech edited, so.
Yeah.
So Jordan, kind of let you talk about
basically,
Bloodhound.
this is a tool that has become almost a gold standard in identifying a path to DA. So it's using similar commands to gather trust relationships and who's in what groups, where people are logged on, and then uses a GraphDB to put together a pretty easy path where you can see relationships that may have been missed in maintaining a clean environment. So this never happens in real life. It's never easy to get to DA, but in this case, we got there pretty quick.
I think what Bloodhound is really showing us is if you want to get to a certain system, it's going to show you the path of credentials to get there.
Absolutely.
And resources. It's really, this is giving us domain trust recon. It's really going to give you an idea if you, kind of like I said, if you have a position on the network that you want to get to, it's going to analyze the network and tell you which path in Active Directory can get you there using credentials or user accounts, trust privileges, that type of thing.
We don't mention sysinternals here, but sysinternals might also tell us with PS logged on where the user we sprayed, Jenkins admin, is on the network. But in this case, Bloodhound found it.
We have a question. How noisy intrusive is Bloodhound?
I would say probably very. It's using net commands.
Yeah.
If you're monitoring your network for net commands and things of that nature, you will
Yeah, it lights
pretty
up like a Christmas
quickly
tree.
see.
Yeah. But oddly enough, a lot of people don't detect it, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, SIMs aren't tuned properly to detect it, and number two, even if they are tuned properly to generate alerts, most like SIM analysts, they have alerts that are sent to them, and then their email has a filter that puts it into a folder, and they look at it whenever they have time. So it's kind of funny. A lot of times they'll be like, "Oh, we caught you. Well, we got this one alert in this email in this folder, and it happened at this time." Like, well, would you have acted on that if you didn't know that we were doing the attack real time? And they're like, well, no, we would never have seen that. So, but some user behavioral analytics platforms are actually very good at detecting this type of activity.
So we also want to talk about group policy preferences, and there's a specific vulnerability out there that was fixed in a hotfix and subsequently in updates that I guess leaked some credentials.
Basically, you used to be able to create a GPP with a username and password to map stuff.
Yeah,
that,
and then
that
the
is
key was
grayed out.
published by Microsoft, so you could decrypt anyone's.
Thank you.
Yes.
So kind of the key point there is
This is something we still check for because they're still out there.
I think last week it actually showed up, believe it or not. We're seeing it less and less. Like about a year and a half ago, 2 years, it was almost every single test we'd find a GPP password. And now it's like once a month, but it's still celebrated by our entire company.
So let's just kind of recap where we are here. Basically, we get into a network on a system, whatever privileges you give us, whether it's on the domain, whether it's not on the domain, whether it's Linux or Windows, and we start running our tools like Responder, InBay. Then we go through and pull lists of users and hosts and try to password spray those users, see if we can pivot with tools like Bloodhound. Find a credential, where is that user logged on, what privileges do we have there, group policy preferences. It's just something we're going to check for. Is there an unattended XML file on the network with a domain admin account that joins image systems? And so Microsoft is taking care of this, which is nice. It's good to see. Keep your stuff clean. We're going to mention Laps here just because it's a tool that you should be running.
So this kind of brings us to vulnerability scans and vulnerability management. One of the key things here is that, you know, if you're doing an engagement like this, you want to have full brevity into the entire network and see all the different things that you can ping on and try to exploit, and eventually get you to a better reconnaissance stance where you have more information. That's really what we're getting at here. There's lots of different tools out here that can do this. A few of the named ones, Nexpose, Nessus. We've got OpenVAS out there, which of course is another one. And then of course my favorite, Acme, which is all the other ones out there. Not my favorite at all, but there's a lot of them out there. We just named a couple of the top ones that are at the top of my head at the time.
Sure. So we've had a lot of experience looking at reports from all these tools. OpenVAS is probably our least favorite and what I believe to be least useful. Nexpose reports a lot closer to reality than, so let's say I get a Nessus report on the inside of a network and I get to go through and I get to validate test results. And by the time I'm done writing a report based on a Nessus scan, the results and the findings I write up are a lot closer to what Nexpose tells me if it ran the same scan. Then, so the tools have their place and they all serve their appropriate function. So reality versus reporting is some tools are going to tell you lots of stuff, give you lots of red, and other tools are going to give you a much closer picture of what the actual vulnerabilities are.
And there's always a type of false positives, right?
Absolutely, and that's what Nessus will give you lots of stuff to look at. After you validate those findings, it often looks much closer to what Nexpose tells you up front.
And it's also interesting how the two vendors look. You know, everyone thinks, well, we need a tool that gives us fewer false positives. And I don't think that people quite understand exactly what that means. So whenever you're testing something, imagine that you have a door, okay? A door to a building. And you can look at the door on that building and you can make assumptions based on the door about what's behind that door and what vulnerabilities would actually exist. A lot of the vulnerability assessment tools, they'll look at WordPress, look at your WordPress version, and then they'll make assumptions about what plugins you have enabled on that WordPress that may not be there, but it can't find out for sure because they can't open the door. But they're going to make those assumptions because they want to err on the side of caution, because false negatives are far more dangerous than false positives. So that's really, really, really why you start getting different false positives. Now, that also becomes even more important whenever you're talking about PCI ASV. Whenever you go through like the ASV test with the scanner that tends to report the most false positives tends to be the most accurate for the ASV scanning engine. So it's really, really weird. It's not as clean as this tool is better than that tool, because it's all different in how they approach what it is they're making assumptions about and what they can see for reality. So with Nessus, a lot of their default plugin policies, the way that they work is they will not report on a vulnerability unless they can confirm that that vulnerability is there. But there's also other scan policies where it'll make those types of assumptions. So tuning your vulnerability assessment scanner, whether it's Nexpose or Nessus, is really, really critical.
So we ask here, is red always bad? Not necessarily, but if you are in a policy-driven compliance environment, yeah, you can't have red. You can't have high priority vulnerabilities either. So is a vulnerability scanner going to tell us when it finds stuff like users, password file, super secret credentials, or scary stuff? No, it's not. So you better scroll all the way through those informational findings and review browser enumeration or site enumeration and share locations.
It raises a good point that your vulnerability scanner going through this is going to find those vulnerabilities, but there's also a tacit vulnerability in someone putting their bank account or the company's bank account information on a file on their desktop, and that's where they store it, because why not? I lock my computer when I go to lunch. It's safe, right? And your vulnerability scanner is checking for Convoke. Yes, we also have a blog post on that. You know, the point there is
Convoke
that
is awesome.
yes,
Let's just say that.
the point there is that your vulnerability scanner is going to look for those exploits, those things that can be problematic and provide doors into your environment, but they might not be looking for something as simple as an employee that leaves their computer unlocked that had a file on their desktop with the bank account information.
And a lot of the other stuff, the reason why this webcast, you know, I think it's important, is a lot of the stuff that you started with, like when you talk about LLM&R, whenever you talk about Responder, Nessus isn't going to pick that up. You know, that's you know, even group policy password, group policy GPP password, group policy preferences passwords that show up. A lot of scanners won't do that because they don't want to touch that sysvol share, because they're afraid if they actually do corrupt it, that's what we call bad. You can configure it to totally do that, absolutely, without question, but you do have to be careful. So you're absolutely right in pointing out that these don't capture absolutely every vulnerability. It's not the end-all be-all by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and this is a webcast about internal vulnerabilities, but this is the only slide we have about vulnerability scanning. So it's not the end-all be-all.
Absolutely.
We have a couple questions. I don't know if you've hit on them because I'm trying to do a lot of things at once. But for internal vulnerability scans, would you recommend authenticated scans or unauthenticated scans?
Depends on your compliancy obligations. If you need to know if Windows patches are installed on your systems, vulnerability scanners aren't necessarily going to find it without being authenticated to the systems to actually check. However, when you run an authenticated scan, you get the hugest mess you can even imagine back.
Well, and it's also steps, right? Like you don't want to jump straight into full authenticated scanning for absolutely everything in your environment, because you're going to become overwhelmed with all the vulnerabilities that are discovered very, very quickly. If you have been doing external vulnerability assessment scanning, you're maybe doing some analysis at the edge with like passive vulnerability assessment scanning, you got a pretty good idea, you're up to date on patches, then you can start moving into that authenticated scanning. But you don't want to just say, this is better than that, and I'm just going to go right to authenticated scanning, because you're going to become overwhelmed very, very, very quickly.
Down the road, when your security program is very mature and you're well managed, absolutely. So authenticated scans also report on stuff like Java version and Flash and browser, and it can be very messy.
Any other questions we have, Sierra?
I lost track. You go ahead.
All right.
Sorry, guys.
I'll call out the ones that I think
Okay.
are good.
So we've got some items out there that we called those arsenals. Those tools are going to be used, and how do you mitigate them? What can you really do? And one of the key things out from there is keep the OS updated. You know, keep the software that's on the OS updated. Workstation and server firewalls up. You know, block those ports that aren't being used.
Inbound and outbound.
Absolutely. application whitelisting, you'll hear John pound that one all the time. Long passwords, more than 14 characters. NTLM has a big problem with being 14 characters or less and how it operates on those and creates hashes from them. It makes them very easily crackable. Even with rainbow tables now for NTLM, they're out there. So make your passwords longer. We've got blog posts out there on how to make your maximum or minimum password length more than 14 characters in Windows. Clean up your systems with labs. Keep them updated. And another one on there is red team yourselves. You have to. You have to know where your vulnerabilities are so that you can patch those holes.
Microsoft is definitely doing a better job of keeping their OSs patched, updated.
So there's a question here that is a very, very common misconception. Is that a reference to replace NTLM v2 versus NTLM? They're two completely different things. The only password hashes that you have in your environment are LANMAN and NTLM. That's it. NTLM v2 is an authentication protocol. So they're two completely different things. NTLM v2 is completely different from LANMAN and NTLM v1, which is the same as LANMAN for authentication. So please, try to look at those as two separate issues. NTLM and LANMAN are hashing. NTLM v2 is an authentication protocol. And I know that is really, really, really kind of confusing, but that's just kind of a Windows-ism.
PowerShell Roundup here. Basically, there's a huge list of tools these days for use on internal networks and assessing things, testing things. The BHIS team has been developing tool after tool after tool that are incredibly useful. Mail Sniper and Host Recon. PowerMeta proved for me on my last engagement username format from publicly available documents. There's PowerSploit, Bloodhound. These tools can wreak havoc on the inside of your network. Be sure you put in effort to
Keep them quiet.
Limit execution.
I think that when we talk about execution, I think you really need to also bring up IEX and Memory Cradle and how that's being employed here in the next couple slides that we have. So move right on. We're going to talk about the methodology.
I like the pictures.
There really isn't specific methodology dictated anywhere in our, I guess, how we operate at BHIS. So in this case, we basically figured out we could execute PowerShell. I asked Ken to create new GPOs that limit PowerShell execution on certain systems. We did not get around to actually testing PowerShell without PowerShell. But in this case, we used PowerSploit, Bloodhound, Nishong to pivot, shell to shell, and PowerCat, of course. These tools gave me, as an attacker on the network, a foothold, an ability to pivot, an ability to dump things, and a way to get stuff out.
Absolutely, and it's worth noting that those group policies for preventing PowerShell, you do a lot of research on them, and you kind of end up in the same boat that you're trying to prevent the PowerShell executable. Not necessarily just all the libraries and things like that, but you're down to the point that you have to prevent the execution of the actual PowerShell modules, and it's kind of cumbersome, and it kind of gets to the point that it's fairly easy to get around. I think with we have a blog post that Brian Furman did, PowerShell without PowerShell, that just gets right by that.
It's
so
just frightening.
That gets into application whitelisting all over again. So Jordan, one of the tools you used was PowerSploit, and I kind of let you talk about that. And
sure, all the options in here. I don't know if how are we doing for time? 30 minutes?
We're good.
Good. Basically, I downloaded all the tools I wanted, posted them on a public Kali server, and then ran a Python simple HTTP server. We left all our antivirus up. We tested some of this stuff on Windows Defender, fully patched, on Windows systems that were fully patched. We tested some of this stuff against FortiClient, patched, updated, all the latest and greatest everything. But really nothing stopped the execution using invoke expression or the IEX PowerShell. These are just tools we use on a daily now to invoke shellcode, copy data, check for privilege escalation. These get caught if you download the scripts into a container on a Windows system running Defender, running any AV. They get picked up, they match signatures, they get deleted, you can't use them. But when you post them, run them raw using the little memory cradle technique, it gets by everything.
and my understanding of how that works is you're telling PowerShell to load up this PowerShell file that's on a website, and it's loading that directly into memory without having to first download it.
Yeah, that is, a lot of that research with Casey Smith or SubT. I mean, every single webcast we got to mention SubT at least once, right? And but the ability to invoke and run things is kind of what he's been focusing on for the past couple of years. But then it goes all the way back, like SCT files, being able to download those as well and execute them. And we saw some research where you can download and execute things over bits for bypassing a lot of the sandboxing protocols that are available. And it's quickly getting to the point, I think you guys, I don't know, might agree, you're going to get some level of execution on the system, no matter how hard it's locked down. So it has a lot of internal segmentation, a lot of firewalling, and a lot of monitoring to try to stop that post-exploitation if it becomes so critical.
So again, talking a little bit about Bloodhound, Active Directory Recon.
Well, we forgot to mention on the last slide the Calamity Jane.
Ah, yes, it is Calamity Jane. I figured John was going to interrupt and say it, but a little bit better, closer Deadwood reference. Calamity
Yes.
Jane, at least geographically more accurate. Going back to Bloodhound, Active Directory Recon, the gold standard for getting past the DA. It might not get you the DA creds, but it's going to tell you how to get there.
And hopefully you can spray a user, identify a user on the network where a DA is logged in, or that user's got local admin on their system and there was a DA on it at some point, and yeah.
Then you're down to pivoting and getting to those creds. So Nishong is another tool that Jordan worked with to get running, and very interesting. I kind of watched him do work on some of these, and it's super interesting how these work. Jordan?
It's just basically the Netcat interpretation in PowerShell. We're taking a look at almost out of 504 in that you learn Netcat and you use Netcat, and it's been ported to PowerCat.
Yep.
Full circle.
Full circle, absolutely.
Well, really, Netcat, it just has tons of variants, right? Like you have PowerCat, we have GCat, we have SOCat, we have CryptCat,
We have DNSCat.
we have DNSCat, basically anything with cat on the end. So it's just one of the different tools. And I think it gives you a variety of different things to test in your environment to see if you can detect those communication protocols too.
So a couple slides back, we discussed bypassing antivirus, and here was the only time where I had antivirus catch me, and it was me running psexec against a remote system with a password sprayed user. From the remote system, we did PowerShell exec bypass, and then I tried to instantiate the IEX module and got caught. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but it was trying to execute PowerShell in the memory cradle with Mimikat specifically on a remote system where I got flagged and caught.
Yeah, it's worth noting this was not on the workstation we were given in that domain. It was actually being remotely executed and trying to run. So let's talk about some mitigations again. Restrict group policy, or PowerShell with group policy, endpoint protections. The standard antivirus is essentially null and void, but it's absolutely necessary. It's still out there. It's going to catch some of the stuff. I don't think what it will catch is the targeted attacks that you've got a professional in there that is trying to get through. They're going to get through. But when you've got other
If someone wants to get the stuff into your car, they're going to smash the window.
Yeah, they'll get through.
But you should still lock the door.
But you should still lock the door, because there's some that don't want to smash the window. It's absolutely true.
So the reference here is the OK Corral.
Yes.
Showdown.
So application whitelisting, Windows Firewall, turn it on everywhere. Obviously, also network firewalls are necessary as well. Limit PowerShell, command line, limit those things. Unless you're a user base that needs to have them to do their job.
Make it harder.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are all done. Right?
That was it?
Yeah.
It's only 34.
No, we're not
wait,
done yet.
no,
Okay,
that's
we
not
got,
it.
there's more.
Wait, we're not done though. Hang on, are we
We
done?
got some questions. We'll take this.
All right.
Straight, all right. So could you define standard AV?
It's
All of that.
John's reference is toilet paper, right?
Yeah, it's toilet paper, right? It's one of those things where when you have it, it's a commodity. It's not gonna. Well, I guess toilet paper is pretty effective at its job. That would be one glaring difference between toilet paper and antivirus.
Oh
Toilet
my.
paper works.
There is budget toilet paper.
There is budget
I
toilet
actually
paper.
prefer bunch toilet paper.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So somebody said I want a refund Dude, I'm getting paid to watch this. Don't cut it short. Too much information. Just like
We're
John
kidding.
wanted. Raspy, scratchy, AV.
Wait,
Wait.
hang on.
Wait,
Is
we're
there
not
more?
done yet.
There's more.
There's more. Okay.
Wait.
So we got
That was
DA.
You stay in business doing this. So, all right.
I thought we were gonna give everybody a half-hour break. All right.
Yeah. Take a breather.
So there's more to recon than just grabbing DA and running with it. Like we said
Train
before.
wreck?
Well, with,
Thus far, our network was a train wreck.
It really
We got
was.
to DA twice in less than 12 hours of
This doesn't
testing.
make me feel very good.
It's a lab. We posted our passwords. If you can get into the lab, you can have fun.
so there's some other options out here that now that you've got domain admin, now that you've got creds for all the users in your domain, and you're being just pulling the domain, right? So what are you going to do with it? You've got those creds, but it doesn't really mean anything at that point. Where's the data? And that's kind of the next point here is you now have full access to this domain. The business is really the data. And this kind of gets into the next spot of finding that data and being able to capture it and exfiltrate it, that type of thing. And it's just kind of the point that with Recon, you're not done at just getting those creds. You now need to go in and really find where the data is, find where the business is, and that's where the big disruption can come in play. So the tools we're using to do this with are ShareFinder and FileFinder. Drone user modules and PowerSplate. I'll let you talk about them.
Yeah,
Share them on
absolutely.
the network.
So at this point, our lab is in its infancy as far as the file shares go. We're kind of building our own collection of honey data to make it interesting. We created some shares.
We're taking, legitimate customer data and populating it to make it more appealing.
No, we don't do that.
No, we're not.
No,
We're totally
that's
not
not
doing that.
happening.
Ignore the owner of the company. That's not happening.
So the goal is go find the shares. Give me a list of all the shares. Invoke ShareFinder to do that. Then FileFinder is designed to go look for interesting stuff like pass, creds, sensitive, secret. These tools are built to enable our job to be really nice and easy.
Yes, absolutely. So the first command there we're running is we go find all the shares and dump those to a file, shares.txt, and then use that shares.txt file with FileFinder, and then go find all the files there. And you're specifically going back through there later and looking for interesting things in those files, right?
Yes. We didn't have enough interesting data for me to post anymore. Screenshots, slides, things.
We just got an interesting question. Someone said, what is a tool that you could use to find the next most highly privileged user? And it doesn't quite work out that way. Bloodhound is great at finding ways to getting to domain administrator, or trying to find a system where you have local administrator or your account is in the local administrators group. But a lot of times, whenever we're trying to find other accounts, we may not get domain administrator. That happens quite a bit. However, by doing password spraying, we were joking about summer 2017 earlier, password spraying, we find, 15, 20 more accounts. We then look at the permissions those accounts have, and they may not be domain administrator, but they might be in charge of a share that has HR data, finance, or they might have access to a share that has the jump host passwords for the PCI environment. So a lot of times you have to start chaining these things together, and I think that that's one of the things that is kind of important. Very rarely do any one of these tools exist just by themselves. We're usually chaining them, and that's kind of the flow of this webcast, is chaining one thing to another, to another, to another. So this is kind of a fun tool too. I like this one.
So now that you've got data, you found data, you want to know how you can get it out of the environment as easily as possible. And there's a tool out there.
Well, it's not necessarily a tool, just a server that Bo built, posted on the internet,
Absolutely.
and uses an awesome IP tables rule to accept responses on, or accept requests on any port.
Mm-hmm.
So we use this now with a PowerShell loop to.
Now, if you're not filtering your outbound data,
Yes.
you're going to have all these ports open.
And this is a total asset test. If you hit an environment and you get in, if we're doing an assumed compromise assessment where we have a workstation and we're trying to get C2 and pivot, if we fire this up and it starts saying port 1 open, port 2 open, port 3 open, port 4 open, port 5 open, and it's like all of these ports are open, one of two things are happening. Either you have your firewall to respond that the ports are open even if they're closed, which does happen, but it's rare, or you have no egress filtering whatsoever. And it's usually once we get to an environment that has no egress filtering whatsoever, we know that this is going to be a very, very, very quick assessment. It's usually, you're talking an hour to domain administrator. and total takeover of anything that's sensitive in that environment. So this is very much an acid test. And bad guys do this too. They try to check to see what's open. If they see everything is locked down and 443 and 80 are going through proxies and it's being filtered, they know that they're in an environment that has a much higher security posture. Everything out now.
Absolutely. Very cool tool. So, red team, ready? Let's C2. And there's a myriad of ways to C2.
And basically by C2, what we're saying is, can we establish a session from our victim system on the inside of the network to a control server outside the network? In this case, we tested Interpreter, we tested Empire, got out.
DNS cat and GCAT. And then this kind of brings up data loss prevention. We've talked about, you found that data, you want to get it out. We know which ports are open outbound, and I think John has some interesting comments on data loss prevention and his theory on it.
Well, you guys kind of asked me about that earlier this morning, and you said it doesn't seem to get in the way. And I think the quick way that you can kind of understand how DLP works, if you go back about 3-4 years ago, DLP was the hotness. If you went to RSA, you went to the Black Hat vendor section, even SANS conferences, DLP was everywhere because it's another one of those things that makes sense whenever you say it out loud, but once you do it, it's like it doesn't work in practicality. Because the idea of data loss prevention is, let's watch everything, and instead of trying to find malware, let's watch your data leave. And if we identify your data leaving, then we know we have something we can alert on. And that sounds brilliant, but it doesn't work. It's great for keeping honest people honest, right? If somebody does mistakenly emails out credit card numbers, it'll detect that. Somebody tries to move a document out someplace, it'll detect that. But as far as a determined attacker using encrypted RAR or encrypted data or obfuscated data and trying to exfiltrate, it doesn't really work all that well at all. So a lot of times when I'm talking compliance with DLP, people are like, well, we're going to spend a lot of money and time on our DLP solution. I say, just find the cheapest thing you can, meet that audit checkbox, because there is value in keeping your honest people honest. But don't worry about trying to detect every single point of obfuscation that a bad guy can do, because it's just not going to work.
So based on the politics of data loss prevention and getting in between your honest people and their SSL conversations with their banking sites, what is the future? How do you solve the problem of data leaving our environments?
Yeah. I think that internet whitelisting is going to be huge. It has to be. And it's becoming more so. As our tests get more and more difficult, if you talk to our testers over the past 18 months or so, we see a lot more customers that are using application whitelisting. We see a lot more customers that are enabling firewalls to stop that pivoting and lateral movement, but also that internet whitelisting. There are ways to bypass it, no question. Buying a domain that was previously whitelisted and is now for sale. That's a great way to do that.
Thanks to Brian Furman for
putting
that together.
Harmjoy and a bunch of other people
I
came
know.
up with that technique, but Brian did some great blog posts and stuff on it as well. So it's one of those things that's going to become more and more important in environments, and it's more effective than just about anything you can do. Yeah, we can find one of those domains, but the beautiful thing is somebody's trying to exfiltrate some kind of weird domain. You're gonna reduce the total noise that you're trying to do analysis on, and to get a cleaner signal to noise ratio. Because if your environment's completely wide open and you're allowing all the advertising ads and you're allowing all of these different weird trackers to fire off all the time, trying to do any analysis on that is a nightmare. I mean, we know this. We're doing packet captures on this stuff all of the time. But if you restrict that down, all of a sudden the amount of noise that you have to deal with goes way, way, way down as well. So that's where we're headed. I'm not saying it's completely effective now, because I get people like, oh, application whitelisting is hard and internet whitelisting is hard. And it is, and you're really caught with two options. Option A, continue doing easy things that don't work and never will work. Or option B, do hard things that'll work. And that's where we're at in security.
So the arsenal mitigation for C2 items, this is an interesting one. We talked to a buddy last week. We're going to call him Billy. Billy's not his real name. He might be listening today. He just got a new job at a pretty large organization that is security aware. They're aware of what's going on in the world, and they hired him specifically to red team the environment and then try to make a proposal to fix whatever vulnerabilities he finds or exploits he finds, and kind of assist through the putting that proposal into place, and then checking it 2 months later, making sure that that
was closed. rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
So in the industry, I think that might be called the purple team. So red team yourselves. That's what this guy's doing. He's going out there, scanning his own stuff, scanning the business's stuff, and making sure that he finds the exploits before the bad guys do. Disable net BIOS over TCP. That's the one John talked about with LLMNR. It's not difficult to prevent that, just like it's not difficult to prevent landman passwords by using passwords greater than 14 characters. And always firewall at the network level, firewall at the workstation and server levels. And rinse and repeat. This cannot be just an engagement where you start and stop. It has to be a circular pattern where you start, stop, analyze, make a proposal for fixing it, get it fixed, and then do it all over again. And the reason you have to do that is there's always new vulnerabilities coming out. It's an eternal quest of sorts.
Well,
Really
did you guys see there was an interesting conversation that was kicked up in the community? They were talking about audit and compliance and how it's always destined to fail. They basically said that audit compliance approaches computer security with an idea that it's something that is static, that you can develop an environment that is compliant and it will be secure. And the reality of the situation is that's not true at all. So with these audit and compliance standards that take 4 years for them to draft, like the NIST standards for password complexity, by the time that they agree upon something, the attacks have already moved well beyond that. So I think that that's interesting when you're talking about rinse and repeat and this constant moving of the goalpost. You've got to expect that. That is normal. You're never done. You're going to continue to move forward. And compliance, once again, comes back to it's a series of guidelines. It is not the end state of security, because the end state of security is at least 3 years ahead of it.
So we threw another screenshot there using Mimikatz to get out another hash, just to show that once you're in the environment, you have access to these tools. It's very simple to do. So that's kind of where we're at. And Sierra, do you have any questions hanging out there?
I've been knocking them out pretty
Awesome.
good here.
Okay.
So I think it worked out pretty well. See, does anybody have any questions they would like to ask before we actually wrap it up? All right, so the firewall thing, is it just to stop new ports from being opened, C2 or data exfiltration? It is, but there's actually 2 firewall things. It's egress traffic that's leaving the environment. Nothing should leave your network that isn't monitored and specifically authorized. You might want to stop sharing your screen.
Yes, sir.
And the other thing is when we're talking about firewalls, understood that we're not just talking about firewalls that are leaving, protecting what's leaving your environment, but also the firewalls that are basically on your host, stopping that machine-to-machine communication. Because with Bloodhound, it's dependent on me being able to access other workstations with the account, the domain creds that I have now, and being able to do that, moving to another machine where my account has higher privileges. So you want to stop that lateral movement. Compliance gives us a bat to raise awareness and isn't for hardening. That's true. We just need to make sure that everyone knows that as well. Are you able to do any of these pen tests remotely? Yes. The only thing we need is initial access.
Yeah.
And I was
Citrix.
thinking, with our environment, do we have the OA portal, right? We could set up a
I don't know,
Citrix
do we?
or something like that.
I think we ran into.
Oh, it's ridiculously expensive. We'll just bring it up for 90-day lessons.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
One of the things we should do,
Deleted
because
at
this
that
is
point.
kind of a really nice post-exploitation kind of primer, is possibly we should have another webcast where we basically have like the team sit down and say, here's a domain, we're going after it, and do the entire thing live, beginning all the way through.
Yeah. In this case, we put
Live
together a
demos.
pretty.
You did pretty close to that with screenshot.
Yes.
The only problem that we
It
run
took
into
12 hours.
the last time that we did that webcast where we had the OA portal and Bo demonstrated it live,
Oh my
we were
gosh.
being attacked
Yes.
constantly.
I just felt my heart sink. And blood pressure.
So
Our
and-
states table, that's right. There were like 1,000
Just
states
lit
created
up.
instantly.
So there are lots and lots of people that are asking right now questions about, what about this product? What about that product? You need to stop, okay? That's not the right question, okay? The answer to the problem is not a specific technical solution, but it's about architecture. You have AV, it has its place, like we were talking about toilet paper. You have firewalls on your workstations, turn them on. You're gonna do filtering of what's leaving your environment, doing internet whitelisting for domains and IP addresses and things of that nature. Stop asking questions about specific products. Stop trying to talk to vendors that are going to solve all of your problems. It ultimately comes down to absolute complete architecture, multiple different points. We've been talking about, defense in depth for a really, really long time, decades now, and no one ever did it. With defense in depth, what everyone did is they basically have their firewall, they have their perimeter, their IDS, their IPS, and then AV, and that was their defense in depth approach. And that's not what we're talking about here. So it's more about architecture, far more about architecture than it is about a specific product.
Blinky lights are not the
Blinking light.
answer.
And Frank, yeah,
And
Frank's on
users,
as
you
well.
haven't mentioned users.
Uh,
Awareness is important.
I alternate back and forth on that, to
Do
be
you?
honest. Yeah. So Dave Attell would argue and say that user awareness is stupid because we've been doing it for 20 years and it hasn't worked. And then, you know, you
The
have
comedian
Lance,
Dave Attell?
then you, huh?
The comedian Dave Attell?
No, Dave Attell, the owner of Immunity
Oh, thank you.
and the Daily Dave mailing list.
We learn things every day.
So, you know, part of me, you know, would
Searching.
agree with that, but then I will alternate back and forth between that and saying we need to constantly be trying to do user awareness. I'll pick on Sierra a little bit. User awareness can work.
Oh,
We had a pen test.
absolutely.
Yeah, we were
High
being
five.
tested. We were being tested by TrustedSec.
Oh, that's so scary.
Because we need to have pen tests done, and we're going to find firms that we trust. And
And of course
TrustedSec
they
has
went after
trusted
me,
them.
not being super
Yeah,
technical.
so they look at Sierra and they're like, well, she's public. Let's go after her. And I think Sierra caught it like within the first 5 seconds, alerted you guys, and the alarm was across the entire organization, and everyone
Come after
was
you
bad.
with the
and
bad
that sound
Panic.
I
counts
think we
as
were
well.
shutting everything down about 5 minutes in, and John called me. Hey,
Everything.
you don't have to shut everything down.
Yeah. You shut down everything? Everything!
But I think because you picked on me, I think, you know, coming into this, when I started 3 years ago, I knew like almost nothing about InfoSec. So I would be like a good example of Joe off the street. And I would say that I do know a lot of stuff. I don't know all the technical stuff, but I am an example of a better educated user.
What about the 4th gen 40 stuff? They will be
Next,
the end
next,
of
next,
all lateral
next
movement.
gen.
Next generation. Yes, it's finally
There.
going to work. They're going to get it. We're out of jobs. soon.
It's past cubed.
It is.
What's next?
It is. We're done. It's past cubed. There's nothing past cubed. There's nothing past that dimension.
I'm gonna say this. I love Fortinet. They're one of my favorite vendors. I
like
have a
Fortinet.
lot of experience with Fortinet.
I don't know what the feature is, but Fortinet has that really cool feature. If you port scan it, it says every IP address and every port
It's live.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's that cyber deception, that obfuscation. If you're in a pen test and you see that, you just want to throw your computer against the wall. That's easy. You can turn that on.
My antivirus product of choice for Windows Systems wife parents is FortiClient.
Really.
It
Fortinet.
catches execution on anything except advanced.
Really, except for like a targeted attack.
Yes, exactly.
And that kind of goes also to like the Silence. People were asking about CrowdStrike and Silence. All the valuation for Silence and CrowdStrike, and who's the other one? There was another one that they were talking about today that does AI. All of these companies have billion-dollar valuations, and I don't know if you're an investor how you can sink hundreds of millions of dollars into a product that has 6 competitors, and Microsoft is now entering the waters. But these products are great, right, for stopping that general run-of-the-mill malware and the botnets that are hitting your environment. But you know they fall to a targeted attack, and that's why it's so important.
And we did not say to totally remove AV.
No, we didn't. Did someone say that?
Yes, no, the answer is not to remove AV, but don't look at AV as the end all.
I'm gonna go with Michael on this one. I'm just gonna say let's remove all antivirus. Remove all antivirus from all of your systems.
Kill your
And
AV.
Kill your AV. Be done. And then from that point, you'll start doing the things you should have been doing 4 years ago. You know, so now someone's gonna tweet that.
John Stranson.
But seriously, if you gave me an opportunity of having antivirus or solid
Oh, that's a
internet
good
whitelisting,
question.
application whitelisting, and
Thanks,
firewalling, not even a comparison.
We have been known to grant access in some situations to
What's that?
test environments.
Test networks against which I can try them.
Yeah, it's
So
building-
I'm gonna give them this. You can download almost anything from Microsoft and get like a 90-day license key.
Yeah.
Download it, build up your entire environment, and then you'll be like, well, crap, now it goes away. Congratulations, you get to rebuild it again.
Here's the thing: an $800 Dell server now off eBay, you can build a very large
Yeah.
Active Directory environment.
Very quickly too. Tom asked, how do you implement internet whitelisting in your internet gateway? You're gonna have something, whether it's WebSense or Cisco. You're gonna have a category of uncategorized.
Disable
Or
that.
unknown, you want to shut that off. You want to block uncategorized. If you want to allow shopping, allow people to do shopping. That's great. If you want to allow people to go to social network, that's fine. But that uncategorized or like unknown, block it. That would probably be the best way to do it. Do you use PowerShell, DCS to rebuild the environment? Yeah, then just build it up.
Yeah.
So good questions. All right. We had a good turnout.
Yeah.
Nice.
Good job. They're the dynamic
Oh.
duo.
Yeah, you come with Three Musketeers.
I wanted to go with Three Musketeers. Dynamic duo seems
We
like
talked
something
about
like
dynamic duos and tights. Yeah, that doesn't work. We're
I
not
know,
comic
it's
book
so
heroes.
cheesy.
I wore my tights.
I wore my tight pants, but I didn't wear my
Oh,
tights.
gosh.
Oh my.
All right,
TMI.
we need to kill
TMI.
this. We-
Okay. Good times. Good times.
All right, everybody. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank
much
you.
for attending. You guys rock, and I hope to see you guys at Wild West Hackin' Fest. And if you have friends or family that need security training, check out SANS 504 On Demand. Take care, everyone.